This past weekend, I saw a video and photo that was really surprising to me. Rioters in New York City. Now, maybe a low-level riot, as low as you can possibly get, but it was venturing in the territory of a riot because people tore down a pop-up COVID testing facility. People in New York, of all places, are saying the vaccine mandate is authoritarianism, it's unconstitutional, and what may also be one of the most shocking things I've experienced is that a New York-based Antifa individual commented on my Facebook telling me that they agreed vaccine mandates are statist authoritarianism. Well, now we can agree at least on that. Where do we go from here? But I'll tell you where we go if we don't stand up and push back. Australia. Recently in Australia, there were union riots. Working class individuals saying that they refused to adhere to these vaccine mandates. They didn't want to lose their jobs, so they rioted. Now we can see that mainstream media in the U.S. is trying to label union workers protesting the government fascists, saying fascist anti-vax riot sparks COVID outbreak in Australia with Rupert Murdoch's help. And I want you to understand how important it is for us to pay attention to Australia. They are building and have already built quarantine camps. Now, I am assured by the good folks at Quillette, a spineless organization that's basically given up on the idea of freedom, they support the lockdowns, that never would the government dream of using these camps to house your run-of-the-mill citizen. Why, the camps are only for people who are traveling into Australia who must be quarantined. The photos out of these camps are still grotesque. One video shows a man saying, we're all standing around waiting to be fed. Like when you ring a bell for the dog, everyone comes running out. The police yelled at a woman for, I think she was sipping tea with her, pulling her mask down. They said, don't you dare do that again. We've seen the videos out of Australia, the manhunts, the people being arrested and detained. It is nightmarish. Now that the media is saying union workers protesting this are Rupert Murdoch's fascists, and that there's a super spreader event, an outbreak happening because of it, how long until the state says, while these camps were not intentionally designed to house people who contracted COVID, if people are going to be infecting each other and violating the lockdown, we need some reasonable location to place them for their own safety. I mean, look, it has nothing to do with protests. Protests are allowed, but you got COVID from your protests, so we're going to have to send you to this camp. There's another story about a man who just had the cops show up to his house one day. And they said, you've tested positive for COVID, so you're being taken to a hotel for indefinite quarantine. And he was like, all right, mate. And he hopped right in the van. History has taught us a lot about just getting in the van, getting in the train car. Yeah, perhaps it's not so much a good idea when you do this, when they have camps set up. But again, rest assured, the good people over at Quillette say, don't worry about the camps they're building and expanding. Once we've defeated COVID, it'll all blow over. I predicted this. I said, how long until they claim the protests are super spreader events? And then how long from now until they say those who contract COVID at these events need to be quarantined? Or more specifically, if they say anyone who violates quarantine will need to be isolated, will need to be quarantined at the facility for their own good so the disease can't be spread. It will come to America if we do not stay vigilant and push back. Now, this story about anti-vaccine mandate protesters predominantly spread across the left. The right didn't see it. And you know what? I didn't cover it either, but I did see the images. And in the images, anti-vaccine mandate protesters took the Brooklyn Bridge, shutting it down. You know why that's significant? When Occupy Wall Street tried this, the NYPD arrested every single person. Many people were climbing up to the walkway to escape arrest. It was a major moment where buses were brought in, but now the anti-mandate protesters, they're not standing for it, and they successfully took the bridge. Well, let's take a look at what's going on, what happened here in New York, and what will happen if we don't pay attention to Australia. What will happen to the rest of us? Before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member, and you'll get access to exclusive members-only segments in the Timcast IRL podcast, as well as from our new show, Tales from the Inverted World, which will be coming soon. The show is live. Episodes every Sunday morning. And we're going to have a conversation members-only podcast exploring these ideas and reading comments you leave on the timcast.com page for the episode. So if you go to the episode 1 and you leave a comment, who will actually be answering questions in that members-only segment. But don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share this show with your friends if you think it's really important, you think we're talking about important things. It is the most powerful form of marketing, and it's the only way we will be able to compete with algorithms trying to censor us and with the massive budgets of the mainstream media industrial complex. Well, let's read from Newsweek. Anti-vaccine mandate protesters flip COVID testing tent in New York. A protest in New York City Monday against COVID mandates turned violent as the group made its way across the city. The event began in Brooklyn at the headquarters of the New York City Department of Education. The DOE's recent employee mandates gave teachers until this past Friday to receive at least one dose of the COVID vaccine, or else they would not be allowed to return to work. Independent reporter Brendan Gutenschwager captured footage of events as they unfolded. Now, my question here, and this is at BG on the scene, if you've not followed him. My question is, what does one vaccine dose do? They're saying it's a vaccine mandate and you have to get at least one dose. But my understanding is in order to actually have efficacy, you need 2 doses. So what are they accomplishing by saying get at least one? That I genuinely don't understand. I'm not asserting anything, just doesn't seem to make sense. They're going to say it was estimated that up to 8,000 Department of Education employees would be out of a job due to refusing the vaccine. This number represents the minority, though, as Danielle Filson, press secretary for New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, said on Twitter that 95% of DOE staff have been vaccinated. As the protest continued, the large group then made its way across the Brooklyn Bridge into Manhattan, many carrying anti-vaccine signs and banners. I'm willing to bet that that is not true. And they were carrying anti-mandate signs and banners. Now, look, if you oppose vaccine, you're allowed to. Congratulations, you have an opinion. All right, fair call. You're allowed to have that opinion. I actually am not anti-vaccine at all. And it's weird when people, like Trump supporters are like, oh, Tim supports the vaccine. So what? That has nothing to do with liberty. OK, I don't get. You should have the choice. If you don't like it, that's your choice. Anti-mandate is very different from anti-vaccine. They said they made their way there chanting catchphrases like "Wake up, New York" and "We the people will not comply." The protesters could also be seen jeering at restaurant diners and leaving them stickers and signs. Under a new citywide mandate, patrons must show proof of vaccination in order to dine indoors. From there, the protest began to get violent as marchers began to knock over various outdoor furniture. Footage shows the group ended up at Union Square, where protesters descended upon a mobile COVID testing unit, flipping its tent upside down and knocking over tables and chairs. Police were able to right the tents and tables. I'm not a fan of that. I don't see how that's effective for anybody, but I can understand people being angry. I can say the same thing about Antifa throwing bricks through windows, but I do not think it's effective. It just makes people feel scared and will help rally people against you. They say after these incidents, the crowd kept moving across Manhattan and eventually ended up at the office of the Australian consulate in New York. Australia has been well publicized for having some of the most stringent COVID lockdowns in the world. While cases across that country are rising, the nation has only reported 1,346 deaths from the coronavirus. As the protesters gathered outside of the consulate building, some could be seen with both American and Australian flags. One marcher with a megaphone was heard addressing the crowd, stating, "The protesters have so much free time now, and we're going to be at schools. We're going to be handing out flyers to parents." It did not appear that anyone from the consulate's office communicated with the marchers. Now, this is interesting to see in New York, of all places. I did not expect this. But people of all stripes are saying no. There were anti-mandate protests I think it was in West Hollywood and in Santa Monica in California. These are very left-leaning areas. One guy was holding a rainbow Gadsden flag in Los Angeles. Now, that to me was rather impressive. People want their freedom. But what's to come for us? If we protest these mandates, rest assured it is only a matter of time before the mainstream establishment media says you're a fascist and you've caused a super spreader event. Now, here in the US, they've already done it. They said those that are protesting the lockdowns are creating super spreader events. They're far right. Black Lives Matter, on the other hand, those protests actually reduced COVID. Yeah, that's how absurd, stupid, and psychotic these people are. And regular people, there's a lot of regular people, they just don't care. Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. In Australia, when they rose up and said no, they're now being labeled fascists. Take a look at this borderline satirical article from the Daily Beast. Yeah, they're treating this like it's a serious piece of journalism. Fascist anti-vax riot sparks COVID outbreak in Australia with Rupert Murdoch's help. They say as Tucker Carlson launches into unhinged tirades about Australia's destructive and crazy anti-COVID measures. The virus outbreak linked to a violent anti-vaccine riot is ripping through the Australian city of Melbourne, infecting at least 20 people so far, including a baby. Now, these aren't anti-vax riots. These are anti-mandate riots, which there is a difference. Disgruntled over vaccine mandates. There you go. So this is fake news. It is not an anti-vaccine riot. They say a mob of rioters blockaded the headquarters of the Construction, Forestry, Mining and Energy Union, CFMEU, one of the most powerful workers' unions in the Southern Hemisphere, late last month. Since the clash, at least 5 union officials have tested positive for COVID. Another 126 people became primary close contacts. And according to Branch Secretary John Setka, the disease has spread to family members. Quote, one of the members, 14 in his family and counting, have got it. Setka, who labeled the rioters as drunken, fascist, un-Australian morons, told Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the nation's public broadcaster, on Wednesday morning, we have got a case of a 4-month-old toddler who has got it. Young children, grandparents, it is just absolutely terrible. Some of them are seriously unwell. A news cameraman who covered the angry protests, framed around a vehement opposition to vaccine mandates in the construction industry, has also tested positive. A CFMEU Victoria Tasmania branch official who was not authorized to speak publicly told the Daily Beast the rioters were effing grubs and put union members and their families in real danger. Quote, the whole reason we exist is to keep our members safe. And these effing grubs have come here trying to start trouble. They've spread the virus and now innocent people have been caught up in it. And they're being egged on by the spivs in the conservative media who have always hated the unions because it serves 2 of their purposes, spreading lies and putting the union in a difficult position. The super spreader demonstration ignited a series of other clashes that were co-opted by networks seeking to sow disinformation and discord. In Australia, where Rupert Murdoch controls a significant portion of traditional media landscape, the groups have received validation from parts of the Sky News Australian network. The symbiosis was born in early August when YouTube banned the pay television broadcaster for several days and permanently removed some of its content because the videos violated the tech giant's medical misinformation policies. For the past few days, at least, there has been a bizarre, real-world cross-pollination between American and Australian conspiracy elements. A week ago, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis told a boat builders conference that he wasn't sure whether Australia is freer than communist China right now. I don't know. The fact that's even a question tells you something's gone dramatically off the rails. He said at the convention in Tampa, and Ron DeSantis would be correct. They have camps in Australia. Yeah. And as I mentioned, they're saying it's just for those who are traveling. I want to make sure that context is clear, because that's what Claire Lehman tried writing in The Australian, that people like Tim Pool are wrong to refer to our camps as concentration camps. Concentration camp typically is a term that refers to the concentration of individuals in a camp. Now, because of World War II, they typically have an insinuation of being nefarious and authoritarian. They are. And that is the point I was trying to convey. How much longer until Australia says those who break quarantine will need to be placed in the camp for their own protection? That's what it's always about, isn't it? 2 days ago, so-called freedom marchers in New York ended their demonstration outside the Australian consulate in Midtown, where they announced they were going to hold the line for Australia and save the country. The first round of protests in Melbourne, attended by a person infected with the deadly Delta variant. Okay, you see, let me slow down here and give you a lesson in media. The deadly Delta variant. This is how they do fake news. Is the Delta variant deadly? It is. But they add words that are shock value to drive an emotional meaning. Instead of just saying the basic facts that the government has declared X, government says super spreader event, people got infected. They are framing it as awfully as possible. They're going to say the Daily Beast has been told by a state government official that of the 126 close contacts identified with the union, 70% have so far tested negative for COVID-19. But in a state now experiencing its worst outbreak since the pandemic began 20 months ago, vaccination rates are still not at levels that will contain the spread. By Wednesday, only about 54% of the population aged 16 and over had received both doses of the vaccine. Construction boss Setka told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation the massive spike in Victorian case numbers to 1,763 in a single day on Tuesday, almost 2.5 times the peak of the worst wave in the state last year, could definitely be linked to the marchers. And it's just so irresponsible, he said, this could lead to people dying. An outlaw motorcycle gang member known as the Destroyer, who attended the Union Office protest, revealed earlier this week on his Instagram account that he spent time in the ICU after contracting the virus. Quote, just got out of ICU. COVID is real, he wrote. This week, Australian journalist Sherry Markson launched a book about the purported origins of the virus in the Wuhan lab with Fox News host Tucker Carlson and her colleague from Sky News, Chris Kenny. Toward the end of the event, Carlson said it was courageous English people who did more than anyone else to change the world. Quote, and to see their descendants, which is us, you, me, Canada, New Zealand, display the spirit of obedience and cravenness. I am ashamed to watch it, he said. Where are the fiercely independent Americans? Where the hell are the people who founded the country? Where are their great-grandchildren hiding indoors because of a virus? Where are the men? Chris Kenny, who was also a columnist with News Corporation's The Australian newspaper, said in response, thank you for calling it out, Tucker Carlson. I think you're absolutely right. Despite the urgent Save Australia chants that echoed through the streets of New York City this week, Australians have been quite adept at saving themselves once the federal government finally boosted vaccine supplies from the middle of the year. The two most populous states, New South Wales and Victoria, together with the nation's capital territory, have been recording first dose vaccination levels higher than almost anywhere else in the world. On Wednesday, New South Wales reached the milestone of 70% double dose vaccinations among those aged over 16. But I'd like to show you this about Melbourne. From Reuters, Melbourne cases hit record despite 2 months of lockdown. The lockdown did little to prevent the major spike. Perhaps the reason people are flocking to get vaccinated is, as I said, most people are okay with the vaccines and think they're fine, and they're being forced and coerced by the government. The government makes it as difficult as possible to exist. They arrest you for being outside, even if you are vaccinated, and people are bending the knee. Why? Well, Australia's a nation of cowards. It is. And I don't mean to say that everyone in Australia is a coward. Certainly not. There are people who live in very harsh conditions in Australia. But like the United States, we are also a nation of cowards. People will just drop to their knees and say, I will just keep complying, even though every time I have so far, things have gotten worse. And that's it. It's cowards. Not everybody, but too many. You need to understand every step of the way, since they've locked everything down, every mandate, every restriction, everyone has basically just complied with it. And now we have food shortages. Things are getting dramatically worse. And that's the reality of what's happening. Compliance is the reason your children will not have food. Let me tell you, my friends. I had my friends, go to the store. And I was, people and workers, employees were like, hey, let's go pick up some supplies. And they came back and were telling me that many of the shelves were empty. It was crazy. They didn't understand it because, I thought everything reopened. It's like, yeah, there was, and the prices were through the roof. Ian, you guys know from Timcast IRL, was like, I think we should do a run of emergency food again. And I'm like, we have a decent amount. Not that much, though. We have maybe 2 weeks worth for the crew. And he was like, we should do a bigger order. And so I was like, why not? Right? You buy the stuff, and your worst case scenario in the event of an apocalypse is you have food, and your worst case scenario in the event of being wrong is that you have food, and all you got to do is just eat it. So I went online and started looking for they have these buckets you can get. They're big buckets. I think they're 5-gallon buckets, and they hold, rice, beans, potatoes, eggs, and things like that. It's all dehydrated, and it lasts for 20 to 30 years. I couldn't find any rice. And this is really strange. I was like, this doesn't make sense. I can't find any rice? So I found a bunch of sites offering up these big buckets of rice, and I was like, they had 1 or 2 available. And I was like, they're sold out? I went and looked at other emergency food supply websites, and the prices are more than doubled. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Inflation, shrinkflation, it is happening faster than you realize. Emergency food kits that used to cost $80 are at $300. I couldn't believe it. I was like, dude, whoa. It's absolutely insane how much prices have gone up. And so I ended up doing a major split order for rice. Now, you got to understand, we have about 30 employees here. We're not thinking we're going to be surviving the apocalypse off of emergency food supplies. We're thinking that we'll have rice and beans for maybe a month or two in the event that there is major supply chain disruption, which we are watching happen right now. If it gets worse, I want to make sure that we have some supplies. Granted, again, it's 30 people plus guests. So we're not prepping to the extent that we think we're going to live in a bunker for 35 years. We just want to make sure we're stocked up for the people who work here. Well, people cook here and they eat and things like that. You take a look at what's happening in Australia, and you need to understand we are headed in that direction. Now, maybe when you see something like New York, there's a resistance. But even Australia has the resistance, and you can see where it goes. Check this out from CNN. COVID surge after some Australians break lockdown to celebrate country's biggest football event of the year. It's always going to be a COVID surge. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Check this out. Sydney to exit COVID-19 lockdown next week after vaccination rate hit 70%. Ah, interesting. Well, hold on there a minute. What's this? From the Wall Street Journal. Australia to end travel ban in pivot to living with COVID-19. Interesting. Oh, wait, what's this? Fully vaccinated citizens and permanent residents will be able to leave and return without seeking permission. And there it is. They have done the big ask. They have scared you. They have threatened you. They have taken your jobs. They've rounded people up. Maybe not that many. I don't know. But we've seen the video of the guy being brought in the van for, being infected with COVID. And then they say, simply get fully vaccinated and we'll give you back what we took from you. The headline, as Ian puts it, man stops beating wife. Should we celebrate this? No, we shouldn't. This is not a good thing. This is Australia saying we have a two-tiered system now. The lockdowns will persist for those that refuse to take the injection, and those who comply with forced medication will be allowed to resume life like normal. Yeah, that's a bit too creepy and out there for me. Queensland COVID exposure site list expands to Brisbane suburbs, including Carindale's Westfield Shopping Centre. It's all still happening. They're telling you that if you get the vaccine and just do as you're told, everything will be fine. But what about people who can't get the vaccine? And what about the idea of, having rights? Do you think it will not happen here, my friends? Let me show you what will happen here. Report. Unvaccinated NBA players could face jail time for breaching quarantine in Toronto. Yeah, from Yahoo News. Unvaccinated NBA players who travel north of the border and do not follow Canada's Quarantine Act will be subject to strict penalties, including possible jail time. Under the Act, unvaccinated players will only be permitted to leave their hotel room for team activities. The players must also take a COVID-19 test upon arriving in Canada. The Act also states that anybody breaking the rules can face up to 6 months in prison and or $750,000 in fines. Since NBA training camps have opened up, the league has seen a steady rise in vaccination rates. Over this time, the league's overall rate has jumped from 90% to 95%. This figure includes players who have received at least one dose of the vaccine. Canadian NBA star Andrew Wiggins spoke out against getting the COVID-19 vaccine and until recently hadn't received it. Wiggins has since received the shot, although he wasn't pleased about it. Quote, I felt like the only options were to get vaccinated or not play in the NBA. He said, it was a tough decision. Hopefully in 10 years it works out and I'm still healthy. The NBA can't mandate required vaccination amongst its players, but it continues to encourage everyone to get the jab. The Toronto Raptors have returned to their home city this season after playing the 2021 campaign in Tampa. Every member of the Raptors organization has now received a second dose of the vaccine. Now, I want to stress, they say unvaccinated, and that's where we're going. All of this is, here's how it plays out. The lockdowns were never lifted. The lockdowns still exist unless you are vaccinated. Some people can't get the vaccine. Some people have religious opposition. It's not for me to decide, nor you. But the state has made it clear. If you oppose this, you're an anti-vaxxer, and that's all that matters. Newsweek with the latest. Check this out. Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of anti-vaxxer includes opposing vaccine mandates. They say, the official definition of an anti-vaxxer, according to Merriam-Webster, includes people who oppose vaccine mandates. The dictionary's definition of the term, which was updated last month, is, quote, a person who opposes the use of vaccines or regulations mandating vaccination. The term has widely been used to describe individuals who do not believe in vaccinations, but has not often been used to describe those who disagree with requirements necessitated by private businesses. Some vaccinated individuals still oppose mandates from employers, arguing that unvaccinated people should not have to choose between getting the jab and their jobs, and may have medical ailments preventing it. Merriam-Webster said anti-vaxxer is used particularly often to describe a parent who opposes having his or her child vaccinated. In an effort to get more Americans vaccinated against COVID-19, more businesses and employers are adopting vaccine mandates, and the new requirements are indicating that mandates work. According to a White House analysis released on Thursday, healthcare systems, schools, public sector agencies, and private businesses with vaccine requirements have increased vaccination rates among workers to over 90% at many organizations. Comparably, those figures are significantly higher than the average rate of fully vaccinated adults, which is 63%. On Thursday, President Joe Biden will visit Chicago to promote vaccine mandates for large employers. Quote, "The president's message will be clear. Vaccination requirements work," Jen Psaki said on Wednesday. "Vaccination requirements get more people vaccinated, helping to end the pandemic and strengthen the economy." Perhaps you don't understand what the argument is. No one is saying they don't work. They're saying when you put the barrel of a gun to someone's head, yeah, they tend to comply. And of all the people with disabilities or natural immunity or otherwise are sitting there asking, why should we be subjected to this? And regardless, anyone of good conscience says, what gives the government the right to demand people's papers? I'll tell you, compliance, your compliance. Now, with all of this happening, it seems to me the federal government is just absolutely desperate. They are unable to actually enforce most of the laws that the federal government has on the books. There was a period where most people agreed with the federal government and went along with the laws. And whenever there was an outlier, the feds could send in their law enforcement to deal with it. Today, with more and more states defying the federal government, with more and more people saying no, it's becoming clear that the federal government does not have the capability within its law enforcement agencies to actually deal with widespread disregard of federal law. As we can see here in this Gallup poll, in the U.S., trust in politicians and voters continues to ebb. People are losing faith in the system across the board. Trust in America's judgment down among all party groups. Confidence in politicians varies wildly by party identification. The bottom line, Americans' confidence in institutions, government, and its agencies has suffered over the past year. But these ratings are also low from a long-term perspective. These collective findings reflect a larger cynicism toward governmental institutions and the figures who represent and direct them, as well as the U.S. voters who put them in decision-making roles. Republicans and independents in particular have become even less trusting of politicians over the past 13 years, creating a great deal of distance between them and their Democratic counterparts. Most U.S. adults remain trusting of the American people's judgments, but this majority has gotten slimmer over time and is on track to dip below the 50% mark later this decade, if the trend continues, possibly creating a crisis for overall confidence in the U.S. democratic system. What this says to me, I suppose, is that the media may tell you people are just bending the knee. Joe Biden may say the vaccine mandates work. But I wonder if the people who are forced to get the vaccine are happy they're being forced to do it, or if they're getting increasingly angry about it. There are a few people I know I talked to who said they felt coerced. They're unhappy that they were told to get it. They don't understand why they were getting it. They don't understand anything about that. And I'm like, that's the issue with, the left telling people not to ignore their doctors when you should absolutely be talking to your doctor. They say, just pull in the parking lot. Don't ask questions. Just stick your arm out the window and you're all good. One of the stupidest things I've ever heard. Look, I'll shout out Casey Neistat again because I respect the guy, respect the hustle, think he's a good dude. But he tweeted, go and get the vaccine. My response was no, go and talk to your doctor first. Why? We want to reduce adverse events and we want to make sure people are getting proper medical treatment. We don't want people to be getting their opinions on medical advice from internet personalities, me included. Go to someone who knows better. For some reason, he objected and said, I didn't go to the doctor. I just pulled into the parking lot, stuck my arm out the window and waited 45 minutes and I was done. And then I was like, dude, why are you encouraging people to ignore advice from their trusted family medical professionals? That to me is wrong. But this is what you get. The celebrity left will tell everyone to ignore their doctors. When I tweet about this, boy, did the left get mad saying, you're just scaring people for no reason, Tim. The vaccines are safe and effective. And I'm like, and? I agree. And they should make sure they're getting sound advice from a doctor before doing anything. Because look, it's the same applies to anybody who would take ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or whatever. Now, go to your doctor, get your prescriptions through them. And that's between you and your doctor and someone who knows your health. So why were all these leftists telling me I was wrong to say people should go to their doctors? People on the right tell me doctors are dumb. Not a good response, in my opinion, because certainly there are a lot of smart doctors. You just got to find the good one. But the left was telling me not to have people go to their doctors. My favorite was the doctor will just say get vaccinated. So what's the point anyway? And I'm like, then why are you mad? You're saying people should not be reassured by someone they trust? That's really weird, if you ask me. They want people to just bend the knee. That's what it is. It's about control. I mentioned this in a previous segment that I did on my other channel. I think for the most part, it's not about vaccine mandates. It's about social credit systems. It's about making sure that you show your papers wherever you go, that you're in the system, registered and tracked. It's that they can eventually roll out the mobile app that has a geo-tracker in it. Now they directly know where you're going, who you're talking to, when you're talking to them, or why. It will not end with medical issues. It will expand well beyond this. And that's what I think people just don't understand. They make the argument about natural immunity, or I'm like, no. They make the argument about a battle between the efficacy of the vaccines. I'm like, irrelevant. There are many medications we don't talk about, and we don't know what's in them. The point is, the crisis is being exploited to mandate IDs and social credit systems. We reject that now, or forever hold our peace, because you look at what's happening in Australia, and it will come here. Maybe before then, the states break apart, people, lose it and just say enough. Maybe there's a return to federalism, a very weak federal government. The states can be the states and the federal government does its thing, but doesn't interfere. Maybe that's what we need to save this country. I don't know for sure, as I often say, but I do know that we're dangerously close for the left to a convention of states, which is all in all still a good thing in my opinion. There are almost, I believe there are more than enough states proposing a convention of states to amend the Constitution, which would be good in the long run and just disastrous for the left. I'll leave it there, though. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.